Shalom Aleichem, Mishpachim. All right, we are in the third aliyah of the book of Leviticus in the Torah portion of Vayikra. The third aliyah. Let us begin. All right, this is chapter 2 in Leviticus, verse 7 through 16. Torah on top, Rashi on the bottom. This is with Rashi. All right, Torah, verse 7. If your sacrifice is a grain offering in a deep frying pan, it must be made of the flour with oil. It must be made with fine flour with oil. Verse 7. Deep frying pan. This is a vessel that was used in the temple. It was deep, and because it was deep, the oil amassed, and thus the fire did not burn it. Therefore, the grain offerings made inside its quiver. Everything soft and elastic due to the liquid inside it appears as though it quivers and shakes. All right, verse 8, Torah. You must bring to God the grain offering that will be made from these preparations of flour. He must bring it to the priest, and he must bring it to the altar. Verse 8, Rashi. That will be made from one of these different types of grain offerings. He must bring it, the owner, to the priest, and he must bring it, the priest, to the altar. He must bring it to the southwest corner of the altar. Verse 9, Torah. The priest must lift out the memorial fistful from the grain offering and burn it up on the altar as a fire offering pleasing to God. Verse 9, Rashi. Literally, it's memorial portion. This refers to the fistful. Verse 10, Torah. The remainder of the grain offering will belong to Aaron and his sons. It is an offering of superior holiness from the fire offerings of God. No grain offering that you sacrifice to God may be made out of anything leavened, for you must not burn up any leavening agents or any sweet fruits as a fire offering to God. Verse 11, Rashi, or any honey. Any sweet fruit is called this word, and I don't know what that says. Verse 12, Torah. Of them you must bring to God an offering of the first of your produce, but they must not ascend the altar to please God. Verse 12, Rashi, you must bring an offering of the first. What must you bring? From leavening agents or sweet fruits. The offering of the first produce, the 2 loaves of Alzeret Shavuot that are brought from leaven, as it says, they must be baked leavened, and first ripening produce of sweet fruit, such as first ripening figs and dates. Verse 13, Torah. You must salt every one of your grain offerings sacrifices. You must not omit the salt of God's covenant from being placed upon your grain offerings. You must offer up salt on all your sacrifices. Verse 13, Rashi, the salt of your God's covenant. For a covenant was made with salt already from the 6 days of creation, that the lower water was promised to be offered on the altar as salt and as the water libation on the festival of Sukkot, on all your sacrifices, on the ascent offerings of animals and fowl, and on the designated parts of all other sacrifices. Verse 14, Torah. When you bring a grain offering of first grains to God, you must bring your first grain offering as soon as it ripens, roasted over the fire as ground full husks. Verse 14, Rashi. When you offer, here is an example of this word, being used in the essence of, I don't know what that is, of when. For this offering is not optional, since the verse is speaking of the grain offering of the Omer, which is obligatory. Similarly, we find used in the sense of, again here, literally, and when there will be the Jubilee year, the Yovel. A grain offering of first grain. Scripture is speaking of the grain offering of the Omer, which is brought at the time of the ripening of produce, and is brought from barley. For it says here, and elsewhere it says, since the barley was ripe, roasted over the fire, it is dried over the fire in a perforated vessel for parching grain. For otherwise it could not be ground in a mill, since it is moist. Means coarsely ground while still moist. Has the connotation of breaking and grinding. He grinds it up in a grit mill, similar form to he broke my teeth with gravel, and my soul breaks. While the husk is still full, when the grain is moist and full in its stalks. And thus the fresh ears are called, this word here. Similarly we find, and fresh grain in their husks. All right, and that was 14:15. You must put oil on it and place frankincense upon it, for it is a grain offering. The priest must burn up its memorial fistful from its ground flour and its oil, along with all its frankincense, as a fire offering to God. And that is the third aliyah of Vayikra, portion of Vayikra. I'll read from the Daily Wisdom on the Parshiot from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Here's the third aliyah of Vayikra. If someone wanted to offer up an ascent offering, but could not afford an animal, he could offer up an offering of grain. The title of this Daily Wisdom on the Parshiot is called Humble Sincerity. God instructed Moses to tell the Jewish people, if your sacrifice is a grain offering. When someone brought a beautiful animal as an offering to God, he was liable to take pride in his generosity and in the fact that he fulfilled God's will in the best and most beautiful manner. In contrast, when all a person could afford to bring was a grain offering, such feelings of pride were most likely absent. As such, the sole reason he was bringing his sacrifice was to subjugate himself to God. It was therefore specifically the grain offering that most eloquently expressed the essence of the sacrifices, the offering up of ourselves to God. When we truly negate our sense of self, serving God with simple faith, devoid of any ulterior motives or personal ambitions, we are assured that God will accept our efforts, atoning for our past misbehavior and drawing us closer to Him. All right, and that is the third aliyah and the daily wisdom on the aliyah. All right, have a wonderful evening. Laila Tov.